that don't look right. That looks like a polar bear. I'm thinking, what's a polar bear doing down here? This don't fit.
Oh, no way.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to my first interview ever. This is my friend Rolf. We met on Facebook Marketplace. He gave me some stovepipe for free. And we also kind of met through family and friends in the area. Yeah, I've known for a while now that I wanted to interview him because off-grid living is something that I've been slowly moving towards over the last couple of years, and definitely like a major life goal of mine. So it's good to learn from people who have done this stuff you're trying to do. So yeah, that's kind of a big inspiration for this whole interview. I wanted to start with what are you grateful for today?
Beautiful day. Thanks for having me, Michael, and glad to do this interview with you. Share with you what I know and what I've experienced and how I got to where I am.
Yeah.
So yes, it's been a fun journey, and there's tons to be grateful for, and we want to take the time to be aware of it.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, always. And how long have you been living off the grid?
I've been, so I moved to BC. I'll tell you a little bit about my story. I first moved to BC. As a kid, I always had a dream of being in the mountains and living in the wilderness. It's always, as early as I can remember, that's always the way I felt, eh? And I grew up in the prairies, so that wasn't happening there. And it was never ever my pull. So coming to BC, I moved to BC in about 2002. At the time I was working in the agricultural industry. And by 2007 I kind of retired and decided I wanted to do something different. I had certain goals and aspirations and dreams of what I wanted to do. So I decided I'm young, I want to live the life I want to live, I want to do the things I want to do. So I made that choice to do that. And choices are the best thing we've got to inspire us to go forward and live life the way we want to live it. Choices aren't always easy, and sometimes they're scary, and that's one thing I learned, right? I had to give up what I thought was a lot of security to experience my freedom.
Yeah, I hear you.
So that was my starting point, and that's when I moved to BC. Moved up to the Dawson Creek area. That's where I started living in BC, and that was back in 2002. And then from there, when I decided I was done in the agricultural sector, I went into log building. I worked for a log builder for a while, building log homes, and got that experience because that was another passion I had, was to experience log building. I had certain dreams in my life, and every dream I've had, I've been able to experience. Not necessarily just the way I dreamed it, but it always came out in its own capacity in a better way, actually.
Yeah.
So that was fun.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I did some log building for a while, and then I come across an opportunity to get involved in the trap line. So I thought, well, this is something I want to explore because I'm really going to get into the mountains then, eh?
Yeah.
And that was my greatest desire, was to be in the mountains. So that was the beginning of my journey in BC and being in the mountains. I love BC for the mountains and the wilderness. One of my biggest joys. So off-grid living, I guess the first off-grid living I did was kind of combined with going trapping. And that was my first experience in off-grid living, was being up at the trap line. Not that I lived up there for any amount of time, but going up there with no power, no water, no anything, right? You did it all by hand. And, growing up where I did in the prairies, we had things that were fairly simple. We didn't have a lot of amenities that you have nowadays, right? And so I enjoyed them, and I thought, you know what? I want to keep living that way. And so it was about 2009, I think, when I started living off grid. I didn't want to be paying utility bills. I didn't want to be living under somebody's rules and regulations, basically, to speak of, right? So I was fortunate enough to find, different parcels of land where I could live, and very cheaply, and set up my own facilities to live in and call it good. My first living accommodations when I first started off grid was a big old school bus that I converted into a house. So
that's awesome.
It's a good way to live. I like it. I mean, a lot of people don't. They like the idea, and then it's the conveniences that aren't there sometimes affect a lot of people very quickly, right? And it depends how much a person wants to work at what you enjoy. And if you like simplicity is not necessarily easy, but it is very enjoyable because there's not a lot of complications around it, or conveniences. So living in the school bus, I lived in the school bus for basically over 3 years, because what I had was an off-grid living place a little bit out of Prince George, and then I also had the trap line, so I would bounce back and forth and then pick up odd jobs here and there, whatever I needed to sustain myself, right? But lived totally off-grid, and took care of ourselves and didn't have to worry about anything, Didn't have to worry about a 9-to-5 job because I didn't have to have expenses, right? And that's one of the key things I found was, if you want to enjoy it, get out of debt, stay out of debt. And that was the secret to it, is to not have a debt load. You're going to have costs for living, obviously. We're in that kind of a world where you need to go buy groceries, you need to get fuel, whatever, right? So it's very easy to manage that with, working here, there, wherever you needed to, or, the other thing was selling your products, right? So with my experience in log building, I started building log furniture and different things like that. Outside, I could do renovations, carpentry work. I did a lot of that. So that's how I sustained myself when I needed to, right? But I had the freedom to go up to the trap line whenever I wanted. I had the freedom to, grow and learn self-sufficiency while I was living at home in the off-grid system. So
nice. So you've been going on like 17 years then?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, for me too, and I mean, you can see I started out in a school bus, and you can see what we have today is somewhat different than a school bus, but it still fits into that whole off-grid self-sufficiency and self-sustaining way of existing. And to me, it's the only thing I ever want, right?
Yeah.
I would not do well or live well in a stick house, if you want to call it that, with hydro and gas and property taxes. Well, everybody has property tax if you own property, but rules and regulations inside of everybody else's control, kind of thing.
Yeah. So did you ever learn carpentry, like go to school for carpentry or anything like that?
No, I took it in high school. That was my only formal training in carpentry and woodworking. I just had a feel for it and knack for it, and I started it out just as a little hobby while I was working at my full-time job at the time. And it kind of just blossomed from there. I started building little pieces of furniture, and then it got into bigger pieces of furniture, then it got into bigger projects, decks, and then it got into little small sheds, and then it got into garages, And then I said, okay, how big do I want to go with this? And I didn't want to go that big, so I kind of limited it and just thought, you know what, I'm happy with just doing renovations and going in and repairing stuff. But learning about it while working was a big bonus for sure, because you learn a lot about the trades and the trade codes and how you gotta do stuff right. And it's not that because I didn't have no formal education and I wasn't certified or anything, but I could still do all the work, and I knew it, and still is today. I know a lot about, all of that kind of stuff in relation to building and construction and how things go. So, but I don't disparage anybody that goes to school and gets the education they need or want, and pursue a career in whatever it is that suits you, right? But I also believe that there's more than one way to achieve that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be by going to school, because not everybody does have that opportunity, but that don't mean they don't have the skills or the know-how to do it.
Yeah, I think if you have the skills, there's many doors of opportunity out there, whether you have formal education or not.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are always doors and windows of opportunity because the demand is there, right? So, anyway, that's getting off the side a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So the reason we're here in your shed is to talk about trapping. Yeah, before we get further into the off-grid stuff, during my first visit here, I got the impression that the trapping phase of your life was very transformative and meaningful to you.
It was, yeah, it was extremely transformative. Probably one of the highlights of my whole life, I guess, out of all the experiences I've had and all the places I've been. Experiencing that life in the wilderness in a very remote location was very exhilarating, just for the simple fact that you knew and you had to be aware of the fact that you're taking care of yourself, you're keeping yourself alive out here because there's nobody around that's going to do it.
Yeah.
And that was super exciting for me. Plus just the beauty and the majesticness of the wilderness and what it had and what it taught me. It was amazing. So I started, I'll probably answer more of your questions along the way.
Go ahead.
I get to rattling on here. Anyway, I started on the trap line probably, I first found out about it was in 2007, and then the opportunities kind of blossomed from there. And my first adventure up into the trap line was in 2008, and after that it just kind of flourished, and I got to spend a lot of time up there. It was amazing.
And whereabouts was that?
So trap line I had was about 7 hours northwest of Prince George, way up in the wilderness in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town was Mackenzie, and that was 4.5 hours. So when you go in, you make sure you had your supplies. You had to plan it very well, right? So you're going to go in, you got to know how long you're going to be in there for roughly, and what you're going to need, and what you want to have and what you want to be able to do if something doesn't work. Because always stuff goes sideways. Wait till you take a vehicle up there, you'll find out real quick.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's so that was some of the lessons and the experience of it, but the remoteness of that area was just so amazing.
And was that your first? Was that your first experience being living off grid / remotely?
Yeah, very first. And it was something I always dreamed about. So when that opportunity actually came along, and I just dove into it, and I thought, you know what? I don't care what it costs me, the experience is worth it. And so that's how I pursued it, and it was a very worthwhile experience for myself. In my lifetime, that was probably one of the biggest adventures, I could say, I'll ever have.
Yeah.
And it taught me so much. Like, we can learn all the time from anything. And that was one of the greatest experiences I could say I had up there. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything about trapping, so I do have some questions about that.
For sure.
What were you trapping?
So they have BC, because it's in British Columbia. I mean, each province has their own provincially guided set of guidelines and rules for trapping and trapping species and stuff within the province, right? So there's a variety of species that we could trap. And I was never big into the trapping end of it. It wasn't my goal to be trapping. I wasn't too concerned about that. But to have a trap line, you had to meet certain expectations, right? But the main species was pine marten. Pine marten, you can go anything from a squirrel to a wolverine, and you know, all of that that's in between, basically. You know, so there's guys trapping wolves, there's guys trapping beaver, there's guys trapping otter, mink. So a lot of different species that are available. Now some species they have where it's regulated and you have to report if you trap one of them, right? So because there are less of them, right? So they manage your trapping very closely that way. Trapping season itself is always a very short timeline. You basically trap from beginning of November until the end of January. The actual timeline, I think, runs from the middle of October until the middle of February. But when you get on those fringe sides, you're not going to get much, and what you do get is not going to be that good. So your trapping in any trapping season is very limited timeline, right? Basically 2 months. You got November, December, January.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what animal did you trap mostly?
The biggest one was pine marten. And then pine marten is if you don't know them, they're like they're part of the weasel family. They're bigger than a weasel, of course, and they're about the size of a small house cat. Is the size of them, but very much like the weasel. They can go anywhere. So the pine marten, the fisher, they're all kind of the same family.
Right.
Yeah. But pine marten was probably the mainstay, and it is in most regions, I think. Its pelt is relatively valuable. Squirrels, yeah, you can get squirrels pretty easy. They're everywhere all the time, and a lot of times you'll try to trap a pine marten and catch a squirrel instead. So, but squirrels are not worth very much. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And so you were doing this for the government, right?
No.
Okay.
Kind of the way that works is government gives you the area to trap in. So you get a management area that is your trap line, and to be on that trap line and to actively trap it, you have to get a trapping license. And if you get a trapping license, the government says, okay, you need to actively trap this. Otherwise, we won't let you keep the license, right? What they do want is to make sure that there is wildlife management in place, right? So they put it out that you have to produce X number of dollars in royalties for your furs each year. And if you don't do that, then they can say, okay, you're not actively trapping this area. It's not a recreational area. It's designed for trapping, and if you're not actively trapping it, you can offer it to somebody else.
Okay.
So that's kind of how that works. It's not that you're trapping for the government, but whatever you trap.
But they regulate it.
They regulate that you're actually trapping it, and they take royalties off of whatever you trap, right? So if I trap a mink, for example, if I trapped a mink, they would take a royalty off of that, right? So one mink would be whatever value they set to it, right? And that's their royalty. It's sort of like paying stumpage if you're logging. And I don't know if you know what stumpage is, but when people go out to log, they have to pay what they call stumpage, which is royalties to the government for the timber, right? And so they pay a set price on that, and then they harvest it to whatever rules and regulations are in place, and then they in turn can make money off of what they log, right?
Okay.
So that's kind of how the royalties work. So for example, if I trapped a squirrel, I pay royalties on it. And I think a squirrel you would sell, back in the day when I was doing it, a squirrel would sell for maybe $2.50. Okay, and it might cost me in government royalties 5 cents or 10 cents.
Okay.
So that's kind of how that works, right? So because it's all on Crown land, yeah, they get their royalties then, right? From whatever you do, and then that other whatever's left goes to you, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's how that works. So you're not actually trapping for the government. You're following their guidelines, their rules, their regulations, and then you can maintain an active trap line and have it for as long as you actively follow those guidelines.
So are you designated a specific area, or are you able to kind of choose?
Well, you can. I mean, most trapping areas are owned by somebody, right? I mean, you don't actually own the land, but you have, once you have a trapping area, it's assigned to you. So pretty much all the areas are, but if you wanted to not trap there anymore, you can sell that area. And whoever buys it still has to meet the government regulations in order to qualify, and the government has to approve it before you can switch ownership of that particular trapping area. And what you are doing is basically selling or trading the assets and not the land itself, right? So your assets might be, well, I built a log cabin, or I've got all these traps to go with it, right? So you can sell all of that.
So you were able to build on it if it was yours.
You have to have the approval to build on it, and yeah. So the government says we'll allot X number of cabins in a whole trap line, right? Depending on the size. Most of the time, you get one cabin. And on some lines they don't have any cabins, right? Based on proximity to livable centers and stuff like that, right? I think what I had available up where I was one base cabin and 2 line cabins, because it was very remote and a big area, right? So my trap line up there covered about 1,200 square kilometers altogether. Yeah, so it was a big area, right?
So obviously you were just trapping for the pelts, so then did you basically eat whatever you caught? Or
No, I did not eat whatever I caught. I don't know what. I've heard people eating pine marten, but it's not supposed to taste very good. And so I didn't. I mean, I guess, I did trap beavers once. I did not eat them. I thought about it afterwards, kind of wished I would have, but most time what I did with my carcasses after I took the pelts was use them for bait to continue trapping, right?
Oh, okay.
So they got used again, basically, and yeah, they were used for bait to catch bigger or other species, right?
So then what did you live off of? Like, what did you eat while you were doing that?
Up to the trap line? And mostly regular food like you have here.
Okay.
I just take supplies in, right? I mean, the potential to live off the land was certainly there. And living off the land is not that difficult, but it's also not that easy. Learning what you can eat and what's available in the areas you're in is a big thing, right? Probably the most I ate that was locally up there was fish. There's a few plants we did, there's some mushrooms we tried, so those are available, right? Once you learn your plant species a bit, you can find food value in that. one of the big things, So wild plants that, and I'll just share what I did harvest and consume while living up at the trap line was mushrooms, Solomon seal, fiddleheads, fish, and what else? Berries, lots of berries, of course. There's always berries. In the summertime, you can find all kind of food and berries. So those are the main ones. Outside of that, I pack groceries in and sustain myself that way.
Gotcha.
I think the longest I was in at any given stretch was probably six weeks. A 6-week period, eh?
Was the longest you did it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Most time I'd be in for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, go for a little bit, go to work for a couple of weeks, then go back. And I did a lot of that, eh? And so I was there throughout the summer and throughout the winter then, eh? And basically in the winter time, you tried to get your trapping in the whole time you're there. So yeah, so it was very good, very exciting.
So how old were you when you started doing that?
There weren't no spring chicken, that for sure. I started, I was 47 or 48, I think, when I started trapping. Yeah, and I did it right through till 2016, whatever that was.
Okay, so did it about 8 years?
Yeah, roughly. Roughly 8 years is the length of time I got to spend at the trap line. After that, I ended up having health issues and I couldn't sustain it no more. Not that I didn't want to, but that was the limiting factors, especially in a remote area.
Yeah.
And so you have to be realistic with those things as well, right? But it was an experience. I could talk about trapping for days, and not the trapping itself so much, but just the experience of being up in the mountains and some of the things that happened, some of the things got to see. I can tell you bear stories. There's been, I'll tell you one.
Yeah.
I had a friend up there one time. He was actually a guy who was checking out the trap line. He was interested in possibly buying it. And so I was showing him about up there, and we went to one of the line cabins, which was very remote. It's about 20 or 30 kilometers away from the base cabin. And you could only drive so far, and then you had to walk in, and it was about a 5-kilometer walk. And an old logged area that had been logged a few years before, probably about 20 years before or something. Anyway, we come into this one clearing where they had logged, and by one of the old burn piles is this big bear, and I mean big bear. And I thought, that don't look right. That looks like a polar bear. And I'm thinking, what's a polar bear doing down here? This don't fit.
Oh, no way.
And so then the bear was scrounging around on the pile, and he turns, and when he turned, I could see he had black face, and his paws were black. So
oh, cool.
A huge grizzly. It was a magnificent animal, eh? And he was only probably 75 yards from us. And I thought, well, we're in the wide open. We're sure not going to outrun them. So what do? You're 3 kilometers from the truck, 2 kilometers from the cabin, in the middle of nowhere. And there's this big bear there. And if he decides he's real hungry, one of us is going to be bear beat.
Yeah.
So I kind of just watched him for a while, and I'm sure he knew we were there, but just no interest in us. And he was digging and walking around by this burn pile looking for roots and bugs, eh? And but one amazing experience to be that close and to realize that if that bear decides to come at you, not much you're going to do.
Yeah,
and,
I imagine you try to just stay pretty present in the moment like that.
Yeah, so I was at the point, well, do I make noise or not? And I didn't. The bear was not obviously interested in us, so I told the guy, and he was just totally petrified. He didn't know what to do. I said, okay, let's just, continue on and be quiet and carry on. So that's what we did, and walked all the way up to the line cabin then. But yeah, that was the highlight of his whole trip too.
Yeah. You said you kind of thought he was like a polar bear for a second. So was he kind of like a blonde grizzly or?
Very blonde.
Cool.
Yeah, that's why I thought it looked like a polar bear at first, right?
I thought you were talking about a spirit bear at first.
Yeah,
I was
no.
like, oh wow.
No, he's a very blonde, big grizzly bear, and yeah, it was a magnificent experience. It was, I had other experiences there too, where we'd go out hiking, and you'd hear in the bush beside you, and branches breaking and stuff. You knew something was out there beside you, right? And we did this one long hike, and this happened the whole way, and we found very fresh piles of bear shit where we were walking, so he was just in front of us and beside us, right? But never ever bothered us. They know, and I think, animals know your energy, and I guess I really believe that. And if you have good energy with you, they might come after you, they might not, I wouldn't say for sure, but generally, they're there doing their thing, and you're there doing yours, and they're quite happy to leave it at that. Right? So
I believe that too. That animals sense your energy and your intent, and
exactly. People that are careless, people that are unaware, people that are, unhappy, maybe inside themselves in some way, I think end up in danger then very easily, right? And you have to be very aware in the bush. Like even if your intent is good, you still want to be aware. You want to know what's happening around you and be aware of your environment, right?
Yeah.
And know that this is potential, right? Like there's lots of innocent people that were doing nothing wrong that's been attacked by animals, right? And I've thought about that a lot. Sometimes I wonder if who was there before that caused that animal to behave that way, and or what were the circumstances in that relationship, right?
Yeah.
Animals, like people, you can have the rogue ones too, right? So
yeah.
I was just fortunate enough not to ever cross paths with any of them, so, and I hope it stays that way, because we go out here in the bush a lot as well, right? And we have that same environment here. And so I just try to be very aware, never be in a hurry, and watch for everything, right? And if I see, if I come into an area where a bear is, I don't sit there and admire the bear. I have no intent to disturb his place or his space, and so I'll back off and reroute. It's nice knowing the bear is there, and I got to see him for a second, but that's all I need. And I need to make sure he stays comfortable, so.
Very respectful.
Yeah, and that's the way I've always been, right? It's like, okay, he's there, I'll just reroute and go a different way and not get in his space, right? Or their space.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So those are the lessons I learned up there. That's some of the things I learned.
While we're here, though, I may as well ask a little bit about these traps you got here.
Yeah. So this old one here is a big old bear trap. It's a collector. It's not for use. It could be, but I don't know who can squeeze that sucker. It'd take quite a bit to squish that thing together to open the trap up, that's for sure. But, so that's an old bear trap. These are called conibears. These conibear traps, they come in different sizes, right? Depending on the species you're after. So this is one you would use if you're trapping beaver or something like that. So that would be a beaver or a lynx. They'll use lynx sets like that. There's a lot of bigger animals. They'll use snares or foothold traps on them, especially if you're looking at wolves or something like that. I never trapped wolves. Never hunted bear. Just wasn't my thing. I have a spiritual connection with them, so I leave them alone, and I wouldn't trap them, right? But yeah, so these kind of traps, basically beaver. This could be fisher. It's a little small for lynx. That'd be lynx size there, right? This could be a fisher or an otter or something like that, right? And then you get smaller ones, the same thing, but only smaller, and those are ones you use for your pine marten set, which I've got a few of too. I just don't have any hanging. But that's the basis of those traps. And these traps are designed to be basically instant kill traps, right? So the animal touches the trigger, it's done.
Yeah.
And that's what I like. And you don't want to trap carelessly or poorly. You know, everything's about honor and respect. And when you're out in the trap line, you honor and respect what's out there. And if you're going to do something, if you're going to ask for a gift from Mother Earth, then respect it and do your best to do your, due diligence and do it right. And that was always been my philosophy. I mean, there were regulations. Whenever I set a trap, I checked it daily. I would not leave a trap unchecked without going out every day. Regulations didn't necessarily say we had to, but I felt to be conscientious and responsible, I need to. And so I did. And it was always good. You know, I probably, I don't know. I never, as I said, never was into it for the trapping much, so I never ever had any big collection of pelts at the end of the year. It was like, okay, I think that's enough to cover what I needed to, and that's good, you know. So that was my motive for trapping. And if I trapped an area and I caught a species, I removed my traps from that area. I did not try to trap anymore in that same spot. Again, that's, to me, was conscientiousness, right? You don't deplete an area of the species and then, expect it to come back, right? Because it takes a long time. You take any plant out of an area, it takes a long time for it to come back. And it's the same with an animal or any other species. If you're going to take it out of an area, take only one thing. An old native man taught me one thing. If you see 10 plants, take just one. Don't take them all. Because the next year you go, you got nothing, right? If you take something from an area, don't take any more, you know. If you take a tree, leave 10 trees standing, right? That's my thought, and that's how we have harmony in respecting the earth and what we get and how much we should take, right?
Taking what you need, not being greedy.
Well, not only that, but also making sure it's sustained, right?
Yeah.
You know, you take an area like this, for example, you're close to town, right? Everybody likes to pick mushrooms, for example, right? So if you get an area and you see a big area, and we'll just say pine mushrooms, for example, you pick all the pine mushrooms you can find, and then 10 other people do that, and 10 other people do that, how many pine mushrooms you got left? Huh? Because they all get pulled, right? But if you each just take one and go to a different area, take one, right? Kind of thing. And I'm not talking mushrooms specifically, but if we recognize that harmony and that balance with what we harvest, it'll always be there for us. That's one of my big beliefs, is keep that harmony alive as best you can. Be responsible for your actions. And when I'm in the wilderness, it doesn't matter what it is, you know, where I step, you know, there's things I never realized before I went up to the trap line, right? But you get up above the alpine, up into the high parts of the mountains, there's plants that grow up there. And there's some plants that flower, and it takes them 25 years of growing before they can produce that flower, right? Well, can you imagine if you're careless and you just step on that plant and twist or something, or even just step on it and kill that plant? You got another 25 years before you'll see it again, you know, and by then you're going to be told to know it was there, or to be able to see it, right? And so those things made me very conscientious about where I put my feet, what I'm doing, how careful I am, and how much of in a hurry I am when I'm in the bush. And I never try to be in a hurry. Being in the wilderness and learning these things was invaluable to me, because it taught me so much. I mean, the greatest experience I had in trapping was learning about the animals, learning their habitats, learning what made them work, what they did. They'll tell you a great big story if you want to look for it. All you got to do is look and watch. And it's amazing. You know, pine marten you can hardly ever see. You very rarely see them, right? One winter I was up at the cabin. I looked out my window in here, just like out here by the fire pit. This pine marten comes bouncing across, and then he stops and he stands up, and he does. They stand up like a weasel, just nice and straight.
Yeah.
And they look, and a pine marten's dark brown, but they got a very orange chest underneath, and they're beautiful little animals. Very inquisitive, super fast, and you very rarely get to see them. But when they're not in a hurry, it was so cool to watch. I'll just share one more story.
Sure.
I was at the cabin one fall. I say about August, I guess, and we had a lake. There's a lake there where the cabin was. And it's about 5 kilometers long by about a kilometer wide. So it's a fairly big lake, right? And I'm sitting in the cabin one evening, and just about dark time, I see something in the water, and here, coming from the other side, is a moose swimming across. Well, there's something beside her, and it was her calf. So a cow moose with her calf swam all the way across the lake, come up on the banks right beside the house, and then right in front of the house, and this little calf. And I couldn't believe that little calf swam all the way across the lake with Mama. It was such,
Wow.
like you get cool experiences like that, and those are the things that'll stay in my memory forever, It's just,
Yeah, that's
I
precious.
got to see stuff like that, and lots of different experiences. You know, story time could be a fun time talking about trapline. I don't know, but yeah, it was a life of adventure, and it was a highlight. You know, growing up in the prairies as a young person, spending the bigger part of my first 50 years in the prairies was, it was a nice change. So
Yeah.
really good experience. Anyway, those are stories.
All right. I noticed you have a bunch of like old pelts or something like rolled up there. I'm kind of curious about those.
Okay, so what you see out there are hides, and I do hide tanning. So I had a passion at about the same time I was going trapping and log building and all this stuff. I had lots of passions and desires to learn things, right? And I wanted to learn things the native way, the way the indigenous people, because I had a huge respect and a huge calling for the lifestyles that they lived and their connection with the earth. And that to me was so important. That connection meant something, and how they did it, right? So anyway, I went and bought a hide one time, a moose hide, because I wanted to make moccasins. And plainsman's boots, what they were. Actually, they came up to about the height of these ones. That was the very first pair I ever made. So I bought this hide at a store going up to the Yukon one time. And I took it home and I thought, well, if I know somebody that hunts, I can maybe get a hide. And if I can get a hide, I can learn to tan it. So that's what I did. I started that way. So the first hide I got was a moose hide. Worst one to start with. If you don't learn to tan hides, it's extremely hard to do a big hide with your first hide, right? And I actually still have it there. I got it into rawhide, and once you get something into rawhide, it'll last a long time. Anyway, long story short, I took this hide, this moose hide, and it inspired me enough to want to learn how to tan hides. So whenever somebody went hunting, they'd let me know, hey, you want the hide? I'm going hunting. So I got everything from a deer hide to elk to moose to cow, caribou hide I had, sheep hides I've had. Sheepskin is quite different to work with, but it's still good. I mean, a lot of sheep hides, if people butcher sheep or something, they just get thrown out, like most hides do. But hide tanning is another art of connection, and that's what I believe for myself anyway. It's a huge connection to the earth through that animal. And when you tan a hide good, and if you're again conscientious, just like everything else, you be very conscientious about what you're doing. You do the very best you can, right? And if you do that, that animal will tell you a story. It tells you an awful lot. I learned that too, right? It tells you about, you know, how many struggles it had in its life, right? You can see some hides that have lots of scars on them, right? You can see a hide that's very hard to work with and hard to tan. And if you look at the story, yeah, well, that one, you know, he got shot, but we didn't kill it and had to run and run and run, right? And so the animal didn't have a pleasant death, right? And, you know, so it didn't want to give itself, and whoever took it wasn't careful. And so the whole process and the whole harmony is very important. Anyway, throughout the process, I learned how to tan hide. So I do the old style or traditional style of brain tanning.
Right.
Yeah. So, and that's quite a process. It's a lot of work. And getting to that stage where I'm not so good at that anymore either. But anyway, yeah, that's what those are out there. It's all animal hides. So, you know, when you get them rawhide, you can make drums, you can make a lot of different things, right? Hides have a lot of uses. You know, rawhide lacing, make snowshoes, whatever, right? You can do. And that's the other thing I learned along the way was relacing snowshoes, how to relace snowshoes and things like that. So
Very cool.
yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're ready for the off-grid portion.
Okay.